whispering too.
Security testing the transcript stuff. There you go. Okay, so it's 9:30 on Friday morning. Yay. Time for SAAG. Welcome. You can't watch the transcription. It's not good. So welcome to SAAG. Hopefully you're all signed in and we're ready to go. Next slide, please. So this is the note well. Note it well. If you're unfamiliar with it, there are plenty of links there to see. Next. In addition to that, we expect participants to extend respect and courtesy to their colleagues. So you also need to read this part. There are also RFCs for the code of conduct that you can read. Next. Meeting. In-person people need to scan the QR codes, join Meet Echo Lite. Don't use your audio and video because it would be bad. And then use Meet Echo to join the mic queue. Remote participants, make sure that your video and audio are off unless you're actually getting ready to ask a question or doing a presentation. Next. Agenda. So we have welcome administrative agenda bashing, working group and AD reports. We have a short presentation about next generation internet EU funding. And then we're going to talk about current cryptography practices, the IETF. And then we will have open mic time at the end. Any agenda bashing? We can't see you, so if you're not, like, you have to come to you have to put your little Meet Echo thing in. Because we are being interrogated with bright lights. There we go. Oh, look at that. That's awesome.
She doesn't know memes.
No, I don't do memes. It's a thing. Okay, next. Okay, moving on. So these are the working group changes since IETF 120. We sadly had no BOFs this time. We aren't in the process of chartering a new working group. We do have a new working group that was recently chartered, SSH maintenance. And we have closed, however you choose to say this, GNAP, GNAP? Where's Justin? Those are fine? Okay, good. It's closed at any rate.
GNAP officially famously has no correct pronunciation.
Perfect. So I can slaughter it any way I want. All right. We have also recently rechartered MLS Lake and Emu, and we are in the process of rechartering LAMPS. We are. Tim does. Tim's writing the recharter. That one. We're keeping you on the hook for that. Next. So SSHM has two new chairs, Stephen Farrell and Job. Lake, Stephen Farrell is departing as chair, and we are looking for a new chair. So if you're interested in being a chair, now's the time. RATS, Nancy Camwingen is standing down. She was one of the inaugural working group chairs for RATS and is standing down. We are not replacing her because they had 3 chairs and now we will have 2, and 2 is plenty. So, next. Okay, if you are interested in helping out, we always have chair positions opening. So let us know if you're interested in being a working group chair. You can also become a document shepherd. You can learn about IETF processes while helping advance documents. Ask your or your working group chair if shepherding is right for you. Errata processing, we always need help with this. If you are knowledgeable about an area and you're willing to look up errata and see whether they're worth being verified or rejected or whatever, we're happy to help you do that. Also, attending BOFs virtually or in person is useful to us. A lot of them have security implications, and it's nice to know opinions. And we don't have somebody in the back line. Okay.
I think he removed himself now?
No, they were in and pulled themselves out. Okay, so next. Working group summaries. We would like to have summaries to the SAG list if you don't mind. If you have something super exciting that you want to talk about, we're happy to have you come to the mic now and say those things. Has it been a boring week? Surely not. Oh, here we go. Get somebody get us started.
Paul Hoffman, PQIP. I just sent it to the list, but if your working group is dealing with post-quantum algorithms, which many are, but many aren't, and you are concerned with having your algorithms actually be approvable by NIST, the message I sent out, if you look at there was a long presentation yesterday about surprises that people in the IETF space have had when they've been looking at the NIST specs. And NIST was there and they said, yes, we're working on some of them or not. But normally, NIST publishes specs and everyone says, great, we're going to go and implement them. What has happened in the last 6 months is the NIST mailing list has blown up with, what do you mean by this particular line? Or we want to do this, is that possible and such. So there was an omnibus presentation yesterday. If that's of concern to you, I would definitely take a look at it and keep watching the NIST mailing list.
Okay, next. Thank you very much. Here's an attempted list of related non-security area activities that we follow at least a little bit. I did update this list because I think it was out of date. I'll take comments on whether it's correct. Happy to have suggestions. Justin?
Justin Richard, not a suggestion on the list, but I was just going to give an update on Whimsy. Okay, so at Whimsy this week, one of the biggest things that came out of it was that we were finally sort of gelling around a concept of a trust domain. Whimsy being multi-system environments being a big part of the name. The working group is gelling around sort of inter-domain and intra-domain systems, how those are different, how they're similar, and how they work within the workload space. So some really important sort of foundational definition work and protocol work around that's happening right now. So anybody that's interested in that type of stuff, please come join us at Whimsy. We're not in security area, but there's a lot of security nerds in there. Please come check us out.
Paul Hoffman again. One thing you don't have on the list is IANA. I know people confuse ICANN and IANA. So for those of you who care about DNSSEC, you may not have seen messages came out that IANA is, and I'm by the way, I'm from ICANN, not IANA, but I can report for them. IANA sent out a message just a few days ago that the root key for the root DNSSEC key is rolling. It'll appear in the root zone on January 11th, and it will become the sole trust anchor in about 16 months after that. So the message has been sent out to other places. If you have any questions, ask me. But basically, this should be a big nothing burger. That's the plan, is that they've got it down. And for people who are concerned with algorithm rollovers and things like that, the main news is they are going to roll the key on a very regular cadence every 3 years. It may be keeping with the same algorithm, might change algorithms. So a year after the key rolls, they're going to start talking to people about what should we do for the next one and make decisions, well ahead of time. So again, I know not a lot of people care about DNSSEC, but if you're interested in algorithm rollovers and how they look in the big world and such, do take a look at that. And like I say, if you want to look at the key, it'll be in the root zone on January 11th.
So that's an ICANN thing, but you're suggesting we add IANA to the list.
It's an IANA thing
It's an
because
IANA
IANA runs the root zone.
Oh,
So IANA is part of ICANN, and we could go on forever about that, but the contents of the root zone belongs to IANA. And so they are the ones who are in charge of deciding how, what keys to use, the proper mechanisms and such like that.
okay. Thank you
Yeah.
very much. Next. So we have, so we have some new non-working group mailing lists. PQDNS sec list, we actually opened during 120. So we put it back on here just because we did it like in the midst of the 120 meeting. So I left it on here. And we're in the process of opening site privacy policy, say that 3 times fast. Site privacy policy email list as a result of an all dispatch action. Next. AD sponsor drafts. This is what we have currently. And it looks like the Eastlake FNV draft is going to move to the independent stream editor. And then as a result of all dispatch, we may be reopening SEC events. If you're interested in SEC events and you're interested in being a proponent or being a working group chair or helping out, please let me know. So all dispatch had a number of possibly security area related topics at it. Alpha 2.0 is the abbreviated language for authorization. It was suggested that they hold them off. Identifying and authenticating home servers. The suggestion was possibly to hold them off. High assurance DIDs with DNS. We suggest, all dispatch suggested possibly it was a better fit for W3C. Update ID MEF version 1 will either be, may possibly be AD sponsored. We need to understand what the viability of the claim is. And then the consumer privacy enforcement research tools, which is the privacy.tech stuff in the previous slide. So we'll open a mailing list for them.
Francesca will,
Pardon?
so Francesca will actually open it. Maybe.
Francesca's opening the mailing list, but right. So do we have any comments on any of this?
Hi, Stephen Brown. Not a comment to those ones, but it was kind of a pity the way Bron got stiffed at the all dispatch session this time with his essentially DKIM2 proposal stuff. So I don't know, I'm not saying you guys should avoid it or something, but just to note, it was probably a more interesting proposal than what was on the.
It's complicated, right? So
just to note it, I mean,
it's a bit, so I do think it's wise to say whether you like the idea of all dispatch or not, and whether you like the idea of having it be like in its own slot with nothing else, because there's pushback on that as well. And then how long the slot is, like it's unclear to me what the actual consensus is for all dispatch. And so when the survey comes out for all dispatch, possibly in the working group, in the meeting survey, you should answer it. If you like all dispatch, saying that you like something is just as valuable as saying that you hate something. Because if everybody hates it, then it's going to go away. Whereas if you liked it, you need to say you liked it.
Sure, I don't like dispatch.
Recognizing, of course, if you don't like it, then you're going to have sec dispatch and gen dispatch, and then it's going to take like 3 times as long as if you just had all dispatch.
Just for clarity, I didn't say I don't like all dispatch. I said I don't like dispatching.
Oh, that's a different problem. That I cannot help you with. Because if there's no new work, then eventually the IETF goes away because all the work disappears, right? Yeah. Maybe that's the feature, right? That only works for people like us that have possibly gray hair. Anyway, oh, sorry. Yeah, I just noticed that. Whoops. Okay. Eric.
Yeah, I would just flag that I think if one looks at this list, one might find a clue to why Braun did not get time, and perhaps an answer to how to avoid it in the future, which is, I think a number of these things were plainly not going to be turned into IETF working groups, and plainly had almost no discussion on the list. And so maybe a little sorting other than first come, first served would address this problem of time consumption and dispatch. It used to be the regular dispatch. There was a fair amount of like, you were more likely to get time if you'd seen it, if it looked like you had interest in the mailing list. And that's how bots are handled after all. And so I think perhaps that might also help us to deal with the contention for time in that meeting.
So, so it was a little unclear what you said, and the translation AI technology hasn't caught up yet. But if I summarize, if I think I'm trying to summarize here, is that you're saying that the process is a little strange, that there's kind of completely new ideas happening where we didn't have any introduction with drafts or mailing list discussion before in the IETF, and it's a bit too much of outsiders plumping things for the first time inside IETF, and that's not working. Is that a summary of what you said?
Not really. Is my audio echoing or something?
No, your audio is working. It's just it's hard to understand it. Combination
Okay.
of factors.
Okay, I'll try again. It's less about outsiders plopping things in than about, and I think Richard's here, so he may be ready to say what I'm going to say, but that we ought to sort based on how likely these things will actually become working groups or BOFs. And a number of things here plainly would not have. And if you look at mailing list traffic, and you do that, then you will not stiff the things that are actually likely to happen, and the things that would have been just, as they say, dispatched anyway, would not move them, would not push them off.
Okay, that was clear. Thank you. I will take this back to the dispatch feedback.
I was in fact just going to, plus one, yes, and Ecker's feedback here, just basically, I think, a request for more guidance, proactive guidance from the chairs. Right, the chairs who are overseeing the dispatch process can look at the proposals and look at the discussion on the list and make an evaluation as to whether this is likely to succeed and prioritize things that are likely to succeed, as opposed to just putting things through first come, first serve, and make good use of the time. So yeah, if the ISG, the ADs could work with the chairs to put that in place, I think that'd be really helpful.
So we can certainly take that back to the all dispatch chairs.
I will start anyway. Hannes, so I agree with what Ecker and Richard said. For example, the DIT presentation showed it quite nicely. Had someone, like I wasn't approached, but for example, if someone in OAS had been approached or in SPICE group, they would have known that this is a topic that sort of like out of the 100+ DIT methods, why would that one be done in the IETF rather than in a W3C, for example? Like it felt kind of a little bit not enough preparation, for example.
Okay. We will happily report those things back. All right, next. So errata processing, always a fun topic. So we once again closed more than were opened. We still have a few open errata. Some of them on closed working groups and things. And if, like I said, if you are knowledgeable about the area that the errata is issued in and want to tell us whether you think it should be verified or whatnot, we are happy to take that on board.
I want to thank that. If you look at the number 23 closed, I can probably say that Sean and I did all the work. So that's 2 people in this entire full room. So please be ashamed and work more on doing more errata processing. Thank you, Sean.
So if you are looking for links on what's happening in the security area, these are some things that you can look at. Specifically, if you have your draft is up in ISG for publication, you can see where it is in my queue or Paul's queue. You can also see what's on the agenda for the next telechat, which is the first step after IETF last call. Next. All right, so sector reviewers. We now have 64 sector reviewers in the pool. So basically what this is a pool of people that review all drafts when a review is requested, call it an early review. Or for IETF last call, we'll also get reviews, and sometimes for telechats, we'll get reviews. So there is a pool of people that are listed to do this, and we normally meet at Tuesdays at lunch. In the past, we've brought our own lunch, and this time we had lunch. It's pretty awesome. And thank you very much for Tiro. Tiro manages this process for us, makes the assignments, manages the queues, everything, right? So thank you, Tiro. Next. So this is the number of sector reviews since IETF 120. It's how many of them were opened on time, how many of them were completed on time, how many of them were late, how many of them were unfinished. Tiro.
Actually, that's the statistics from last year, full year, since meaning November last time, not last IETF. The statistics are from the year backwards, not from the last IETF.
So then they were like that in the last slide deck from the previous SAAG meeting as well, and nobody said anything. So, okay, well, I guess a little less impressive is this was over a year instead of over 3 months. Yeah, it actually makes sense. Like 226 sounds like a lot for 3 months.
Yeah, okay, next. And then this is the outcomes of those reviews. The advantage to us is that if a sector reviewer does a review early, it means the draft is in better shape when it eventually reaches the ISG, which means that we can move things along faster through the process. So we appreciate sector reviewers.
And I was going to make a comment that the statistics looks like roughly the same as last time, but now I understand why, because it's averaging it over the entire year.
All right, next. Oh, there you go. So we have Stephen. So Stephen.
This is just a public service announcement. There's an EU funding thing called NGI, which stands for Next Generation Internet, but ignore that. And basically, it's a way of getting money to implement the kind of stuff we do around here. Just does anybody here actually already have had funding from NGI? I know there's a bunch of people in the IETF, but nobody here. Okay, next slide. So the way it works is the European Commission give, I think the latest batch is about 20 million euros to MLNet, and then they give away 80% of that to small projects to implement open source things related to the internet. That's basically it. It says there, lots of sales talk. Go ahead. Next slide. So the grants are small, so between 5 to 50K, and then if you've kind of got one of these already, then the next round can be bigger. It's open to individual people. You don't have to be a company. You don't have to be in Europe. Although in practice, if there's a bunch of you together and one of you is in Europe, I think that's more likely to get an okay because the paperwork gets harder otherwise or something. It's literally a one-page form that you fill in. It takes a few months to get a yes. And when you get a yes, basically what you have to do in terms of reporting is really, really flexible. It might just be, you get a yes, but then you're gonna do something in 6 months, and if you do it, great. If you don't, then you won't get the money. And the reporting might be that you just do a commit or something and push some code out. Next slide. I think I said all that. Is there another slide?
3 more slides.
Oh, well, let's see what they say. Yes, so the current one, this has been going through various rounds over the last number of years. The current one is called NGI Zero Commons. I think about a third of that money is gone, and it's likely that the rest of it will go during calls in 2025. So if you're interested in that, submitting to one of the calls within the next year is probably what you need to do. And then there's one called Review, which basically is a way that anybody who's ever got money from this scheme can go and ask for some help. Next slide. And the kind of help is, the 80% of the money is given away to these projects. The 20% is for this kind of stuff. That there's a bunch of people who help with packaging, security, code review, pen testing type stuff, et cetera, including, the reason I'm here is because we help with the standardization bit. Most of that help, the useful part of it so far has consisted in me telling people, no, you don't really want to go to the IETF for that. You'd be just wasting your time. And that's actually quite useful for them, I hope, rather than them coming along wasting their time. But some people are here and it's kind of useful to help out. Next slide. That's it. So if you're interested, there's URLs there. It's really a lightweight funding thing. And thanks for giving me the time to do it. I think we did this, we kind of mentioned this about 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I think before. And so it seemed like timely to do it again because there's actually a larger pile of money now. Any questions you can ask me or Kerry Hartnett is in the back there. And I'd be happy to talk about it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I guess there's no questions now.
Well, there could be.
If you want, go for it.
Is there? No?
Yeah, go for it.
So far, there's no questions.
Oh, okay. I can escape. Thank you.
So the next topic is about a continuation from last time when we talked about crypto practices at the IETF, where we're trying to document the sort of informal processes that we have around, mostly about like crypto algorithms and ciphers and how we prevent the mistakes from the 90s where we get too many different ones. They all have RFCs and they're all treated sort of in a similar way. Based on the discussion last time as well, I wrote up a very small draft, definitely a 0.0 version. I'm not sure how many people have managed to read this document. Not too many. Okay, so maybe we'll keep the discussion short. So like the abstract kind of says, intended to increase the consistency and transparency in how the IETF handles cryptography, because there's lots of opinions usually involved. Everybody likes their own algorithm. Some people need to have algorithms from their nation state, and there's various reasons why people try to get RFCs. And unfortunately, the way people interpret RFCs outside the IETF is quite different. Like they tend to treat all RFCs as a standard, and then so there's this discrepancy between what we do, what we think, how people interpret our results, and how the real world actually interprets those results. So this document is an attempt to sort of clarify that for both people inside and outside the IETF. So roughly what I tried to do is give a little history, mostly to point out the fact that whatever we're going to do moving forward now, or whatever we are currently already doing, will not be completely consistent with what we have done in the past, because like looking back, we could have done things differently. It also points out that how the IETF interacts with the wider cryptographic community, that we try to listen and take input from academia, conferences, competitions outside of the IETF, and that we sort of bring that back and coordinate that with CFRG, IETF, the crypto panel, and some of the heavy crypto working groups that have been doing this for years, so like LAMPS, TLS, MLS, etc. It tries to then talk a bit about code points versus RFCs, where it tries to get the message across that code points should be easy to obtain, experimentation should be easy to do, everybody should be able to run their own fancy crypto algorithm or protocol where possible, but that we want to be a little bit conservative about associating that with an RFC number, and that we maybe should try to limit that to things that we recommend people actually use, or that we like to make mandatory to implement. Things to do that came up last time as well. I'm still looking for people to help me a bit with text on that. Is what to do with sort of the fancy crypto, the things that we actually have invented here, instead of taking it from the outside the cryptographic world, and how that sort of can be best described as a generic policy. Obviously, there's going to be lots of exceptions in how we do things, because there will always be unique situations. But we're trying to sort of write down how, like, if we invent our own things here, how do we actually have some assurances on that's actually a good thing to do, and maybe how we talk back to the larger community for feedback on those. If there's anything other missing, please read it, discuss on the list. So I've already gotten some feedback, so thanks to Colin Perkins, thanks to Stephen Farrell for initial last-minute feedback that they gave me. That's very, very much appreciated. There's been some mailing list traffic as well. I haven't seen all of it in detail, but again, thank you, and please send lots of comments there. I think so far what I've heard, one of the feedback is that maybe some of what's in the document is a wish list of mine and not what is an actual current practice, which is an interesting comment in itself, because some of it is in fact how the security area directors at the time are thinking that they are doing things. So it's interesting if the community thinks we're not doing that. So definitely there's room for conversations and clarity, and hopefully this document can help. And so with that, I open the queue for feedback. Stephen.
Can you go back one slide? So I think it might be useful. I don't know if it's useful, certainly on the list, but it might be useful here today just to also have some discussion about this code points versus RFCs issue. I mean, I think it's more subtle than you state in the document. In the document, you say something like, you say it's preferred to have code points and not RFCs for new cryptography. And the new cryptography is, do we mean a new protocol using cryptography, or new algorithms, or what? It is one dimension. But I think the preferred is not actually a consensus position. I think it is some people's position. It's a reasonable position, but there are other reasonable positions also. For example, in particular, if you want to document something that's in widespread use for many years, for example, even if it's not our preferred cryptography, or maybe it's new to us. So I think there's a lot of subtlety around that, and I think it might be useful to see, can we get something more like consensus about this topic? I don't know if we can, because maybe there's just too many subtleties, and too many special cases. But I think the document as is more certain about the situation than reality.
Sure, that's fair. Though, of course, if you look at those sort of exceptional handling, that usually does go to either the SecADs or the IEC, and so there is a lot of variableness in the responses depending on who is the current SecAD and what their views are, right? And so some of this might not be. this document isn't formalizing any of that into strict rules that limits the SAAG or the IECs to how they're handling things. Like they have their freedom, that's part of their role. We're just trying to set expectations for the more general cases, and there will always be exceptions, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. But that should be clear inside the document.
Yeah.
So,
No, I guess what I was trying to say was, that preferring code points and not RFCs for certain situations, we might be able to get towards consensus on some of that.
Right.
If not all of it, but at least some of it.
Right.
And that might be useful because we do have these debates over and over where somebody says, you've got your code point, you don't need an RFC, and somebody else is saying, well, give them an RFC because it's worth documenting.
Right.
That does come up a few times.
Yeah, and that's actually one of, I think, the bigger problems, right? Is where people feel they need an RFC so that they can go to vendors to get support implemented, other things. Right? And it's really hard because it gives, like, other people see an RFC and it's whatever the RFC is, this is an internet standard and you must do this.
And we currently have live examples of this tension.
Yes, let's stay away from examples in this session for now.
Deirdre with Sandbox. I agree with a lot of what Stephen just said. I think favoring code points versus a whole RFC is putting a lot more expert review pressure on designated experts than in the past, which we may be okay with, but that is not originally, as far as I know, the role and expectation that designated experts for allocating code points were expected to play. It was more just sort of cursory. And now if we are doing less of, you must get a full RFC to use an algorithm or define an algorithm, and now it's kind of getting shoved more and more towards the designated experts for just a code point, that is a dynamic that has changed. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying that it's changed. Another thing I wanted to mention, there's some good description of the function of CFRG in the document. It's very clear that the broader IETF thinks of CFRG as the crypto people who should be making crypto decisions for us and giving us documents, like normative documents. And CFRG is a research group, and they do not think of themselves like that. They will, give advice, but like if lots of groups in the IETF are doing hybrid post-quantum key exchange and hybrid post-quantum signatures, and they're all doing it slightly differently. Not saying they're doing it badly, they're just all doing it slightly differently for all good reasons. They all have different constraints. And all of them are saying, well, we should just wait. Well, not all of them are saying, but there's a desire for CFRG to just solve the problem for them, and then they can point at the document in CFRG, but CFRG doesn't see its role in exactly that way. And so there's a bit of a deadlock. And so communities have to move because they feel pressure to move to be ready for PQ. And so we have a diversity of solutions. So I do think that we're kind of dealing with a bit of a crisis point of what the IETF thinks the CFRG's role is and what the charter of the CFRG is and what CFRG thinks its role is, and that we will continue to have a little bit of this unsatisfying dissonance around cryptography and IETF until we at least resolve some of that tension.
Sure. Those all fair and good comments. I think part of it, what for instance we see happening now already that is actually a positive, is that like when we're seeing it like chem combiners and things that working groups have started doing their own thing, but now CFRG has actually also started to do its thing where it gives advice, and so that we can then tell the working groups like, whoa, pause a little bit and let's wait a little bit on what's happening at CFRG. So hopefully CFRG will sort of like also look at our communities, see what we need, and hopefully like sort of give that some more preference, right? But you're right. This is
yes, but I don't think it will happen in time. Especially because mitigating the hybrid chems, the case for hybrid chems is store now, decrypt later. TLS is shipping its own hybrid thing, which is fine. Other groups are doing their own hybrid thing for mitigating store now, decrypt later. The supposed quantum threat is to material that's being encrypted right now. waiting over a year for a document from CFRG is just not, it's not in scope for a lot of these groups.
Sure, fair enough. Philip?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. On the code points issue, not all code points go through IETF. I'm very partial to OIDs and URIs as algorithm identifiers because they imply absolutely no endorsement by IETF whatsoever. You know, anybody can create an OID. Related, so I think that when people are proposing new crypto platforms like Jose or whatever, not creating a new registry of OIDs, of algorithms, yet another, should be one of the things that they're pushed towards. The other thing that comes up is I'm kind of like looking at some of the decisions we made 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and so on, that were very much rooted in the fads of the time that we've now rejected. And now I'm looking at some of the religion that we've got around authenticated encryption with associated data modes and so on. And that's starting to look a bit old to me. In that when I try and make this work with that, and I'm trying to create something where I'm signing chunks of data and also encrypting them, looking at the way that Jose makes me do things, it's kind of like bullying me into a certain approach that doesn't fit my work and looks very dated. And I think that in future, we should try and persuade people producing platforms like Jose and so on to not try and take away the control from the designer and think that we know best, because what we thought best in 2020 may not be what we think best in 2025.
Thank you. Chen Kai?
Thank you. I'm Kai Chen from Huawei. Actually, I do think that this is a very valuable topic. So currently in ISO/IEC JTC1 SC27, there.
Sorry, can you talk a little bit more into the microphone?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So in ISO/IEC JTC1 SC27 or Group 2, that developed a cryptographic algorithm. They're also talking about what's the criteria for the new algorithm included or excluded. So for IETF, I do think that this is valuable. So the various use cases, the different algorithm required. So based on your draft, I have some small suggestions. First, for the outside cryptography community, why not we include the standard bodies? For example, currently we reference algorithm from SC27, and also we talk a lot about NIST, etc. So the second one, maybe we need to define what the profile is, what the specification is, and also the cryptographic primitives. For example, currently in the PQC algorithm discussion, needs to define the algorithm. They also provide a different level of parameters for the algorithm. For what's the different level is the algorithm profile, or it's just a crypto primitives. So this kind of concept is, if we can clearly define here, and then it's easier for us to decide what kind of things we can develop here. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric?
Let's see if this is better with no video. So a few points. I agree with Stephen to some extent that the thing about RFCs versus code points in this document is perhaps a bit more aspirational than documentation of reality, which I find unfortunate because I largely agree with the position that it expresses. I think it reflects a split to some extent in the IETF community about whether or not we should have RFCs for things that we don't really think are community standards or just documentation mechanism. As far as CFRG goes, I think it's clear that, like, while nominally a research group, it is effectively a mini standards body in at least some respects, and we probably should start thinking about it like that. We need that, so that's good. But the interaction we have with it is goofy, where we act as if these things which we're referencing and which we're treating clearly as standard specifications are somehow not. I don't see how HPKE is not. I agree with Deirdre being a recharter. I'm just saying that that's the way it is. Trying to glue together 2 points Deirdre and PHP made. I'm sure it is the case that, that there is pressure on the reviewers to do, on the experts to do expert reviews. The alternative, of course, is pressure on everybody to review those documents. I wonder if part of the problem here is resetting the expectations for the reviewers. If there's a big enough code point space, then the policy just needs to be like, this is a document, not like it's any good. And I'd be inclined, especially with something like TLS, to say, like, you want a code point for your thing, we just verify that, like, there's a document at some link somewhere that you said there was, and and one might imagine implementing it, but not that actually it is implementable, and mission accomplished. And if we need to make a new marker that is like not just not recommended, but did not even bother to read, I'd be okay with that too. We're really not, the idea here was never to, like, at least with TLS, was never to be like any endorsement that these were okay for being in the registry. So if people are reading their remit is much more expensive than that, then probably that's where things have gone wrong. These are relatively large code point spaces, so we don't have to be very conservative at all. Finally, one thing, there's a bunch of discussion, Paul, in this document about wanting to have algorithms which were widely kind of agreed to upon inside IETF, as opposed to having algorithms which are only used like in one specification. I think that's one way of thinking about it, but I think another way of thinking about it is that we should only have algorithms that are at least marked, recommended, blah blah blah, that have a sort of minimum level of vetting, whatever that vetting is. And I think everyone kind of has agreed that CFRG is enough vetting, and I think it's widely treated as if this is enough vetting, at least most of the time, maybe not all the time. But it might be more worthwhile trying to codify what an adequate amount of vetting was before we were allowing people to reference them, rather than sort of, is this in why use across the IETF? Because that doesn't really give you a substantive bar. It just gives you kind of a bar. A bunch of people aren't really equipped to evaluate the quality of the document in the first place. Thank you.
So I think I agree with Stephen and Ecker that the prefer registrations point might not quite be widely agreed upon, universally agreed upon yet. But even if that's the case, I think that there's one simple request that I would make of this document that I think could be practical and point in that direction without being prescriptive, which is to just write down in one single referenceable place the policy that, for example, TLS has adopted, where you have a broadly permissive specification required policy with this recommended column and the standard rule, the rules that everyone uses about how you set the Y and no and D values in that column. Because I'm aware of at least 3 different copies of that in different RFCs that are, slightly divergent because of, timing. So if we get that in one place and refer to it by reference, much like we do with other IANA policies, I think that would help at least get some coherence, and, much like the standardized IANA policies we have, hopefully kind of guide people toward, a pattern that some folks think is usable, some communities think is usable, even if it's not the universal de facto preference.
Thank you. Mike?
Mike Ainsworth, Interest. I'd like to actually request you to expand on a thing that I think hasn't been said out loud yet, I think is relevant, and that's change control versus documentation. So I think there's this history of things get used, but it may not be well documented in a public place, and we just want to stick up a document that says, if this thing is used, here's what it is, and put that in a non-paywall place, versus things that we have change control, we can review them, we can improve them. I think that tension exists here. I don't think it's been said out loud yet.
So are you referring to change control of like the algorithm, or are you talking about change control of when it's recommended? Because
Both good topics.
okay, because the initial like people will bring an algorithm to the IETF and they will document it, and so I guess they have change control. If they then interact with the wider IETF and change their document, that's great. And as long as it's drafts, they can do that, right? So I don't think we're changing or we're dictating anything in that process. I think what I tried to imply in the draft here is that if you want some kind of recommended yes or mandatory to implement, then you're sort of getting to the standards track level, and that needs an RFC, and therefore you need to have like a strong consensus in the community, and that's where we kind of try to raise the bar to not just like have everything there.
So I think there's things embedded in there that you know that probably the whole audience in this room doesn't know about whether we think an RFC implies change control or not.
Okay.
So Ecker put in the chat that if obviously we don't have change control over AES, and this is true, but what you do have change control over in an RFC is what mode of AES you choose to use. And you might have chosen poorly, in which case there might be comments on the draft that says maybe you should use this mode instead. So that's one step along the process, right? So you have the standard for the algorithm is somewhere. And in the NIST case, it's in the NIST FIPS. In other countries' cases or in other standards bodies' cases, it's in other documents. But when you put that into a protocol, then you've made choices about how you're going to use that algorithm, and that you should have, the IETF should have change control over. Because if you've chosen poorly, we might ask you to change it. Where chosen poorly means you've chosen something that won't be secure. In my world, that's what that means. In other people's worlds, like it might not meet the performance characteristics that you're looking for, and so you might want to change it because of that. So there's lots of reasons to request change control over a draft that is eventually going to be a proposed standard, and it might not have anything to do with the specification of the algorithm explicitly, but everything around it. Does that make it worse?
I guess the answer I was trying to prompt is like, do we or do we not want to publish RFCs that we sort of don't like the content, but also definitely can't change the content? That's the core issue, one of the core issues here, right?
We do that occasionally. And we might have to hold our nose when we do it. There's some cases where that's required. And there's some cases where we can say, no, we won't do that. It's very specific to a circumstance.
And just to add to that, is that we also have this sort of category of profile RFCs where it is another group telling us what they think we should do, and we sort of like put that in their own little box and tell them, okay, if you want to comply to these people's view, this is how you do that. So like the CNSA profile, for example.
Paul Hoffman, excuse me. I want to take what Richard just said a few minutes ago and take it further. I think it would be super helpful for this discussion if every working group chair who has any documents, like some of these working groups have been running 20, 30 years, that have either IANA registries or how things are added for cryptographic protocols, actually look in those documents, describe what you think that, the specification is, and send it to SAAG. Because I think it would be, I agree with Richard, it would be great to have it in this document. I think what we're going to get is a bunch of uninteresting ones. If we just look, it would be really helpful if every working group chair sent in all of theirs, because some of them will be interesting and some of them will be way off and such like that. I think us being able to have a survey would be great. And I don't want you to have to go do the survey yourself. So we've got a bunch of working group chairs here. Please look through all of your RFCs on the data tracker and see, and you can shorthand them, but I would be fascinated if, working group X had this policy until this year and somehow shifted into this other one. That's actually interesting as well. Send in all of the ways that that the cryptographic algorithms that are referenced in their RFCs are referenced. Are they an IANA registry? Is it an IANA registry that requires RFCs? Is it an IANA registry that requires expert review? Did it change over time from RFCs required expert review? Are some of them, in fact, no registry at all? You know, like we did it in the document and we purposely didn't have a registry. Things like that, I think, would be really helpful for everybody to be looking
Okay, so we'll take this further to the list, and hopefully we'll make some progress and get a new document version out and see if we can get some sort of standardization. No, not standardization. That's the wrong word. Sorry, description, informational RFC out on what we're doing, how we're doing it, why we're doing it, and why it's the best thing. And with that, we are at our open mic session. So, what else? No open mic issues? Come on, there must be security issues. There we go. Peter.
Hi, this is Peter. I have a question, so like a summary from the site meeting. The question is that I'm happy to, contribute to the sector reviews. I'm happy to write anything that's if you think that I might be qualified. It's just I don't know. Is there a process to sign up to that thing or?
So what we tend to do for SecDare is that every new chair is automatically becomes a member and gets to be thrown in the pool. If you are no longer a chair, we sneakily leave you in the pool anyway. And more or less that is the pool of people we use. So that we sort of it's sort of an objective way of getting reviews there. And we sometimes add other people. But you could do both. You can if you like to be a working group chair and you find an interesting working group, then you can be a sector reviewer and a working group chair. But we'll look. You send me an email. We sometimes do add people that are not working group chairs on the list as well, if we know that they're experienced and.
Right. I review academic papers before. I don't know. Like, maybe is that useful experience for qualifications here? I was just saying.
Sorry, with experience, I just mean like so people who've been around that they can actually do good reviews. We sometimes do get reviews that are not as good, and that doesn't really help us. So we're trying to at least filter some of that into user reviews because it's kind of disappointing for us as ADs when a sort of not very good review comes in because it doesn't really help us.
Yes. The second thing is that it's kind of a summary from the Monday site meetings. It's about.
Sorry, can you talk a little bit more into the microphone?
Oh, yes. It's a little bit as a summary from the Monday site meeting of the Nazar thing because it's placed into the SEC area. It's a BOF that we took place in the last IETF. And this time we have a site meeting that, so as a quick summary is that we have, about 35 to 40 people participation. And, the proponents are still very active about the use cases, but we kind of agree that we should shrink the scope and the focus to something very, concentrated. Last time we have many people very interested in the area, but you might have, too much things to look at. So we kind of think if we can focus on, and that's what we'll be doing, focus on at least 1 to 2 or 2 to 3 useful works instead of having all these interesting works, grabbing people's eyes. I think having very focused 1 to 2 works or 2 to 3 works will be, better to do. So in the next IETF, we'll be, proposing this another working group forming BOF to propose our agreements, and we will be working on the drafts on the time, until next IETF.
Can you send that summary to the SAG list? Can you send that summary to the SAG list?
Yes, and we'll send a summary
thank you.
to the. Thanks.
Turo.
And when Paul was saying automatically, he means that when somebody of us reminds that, oh, there is new working group chairs that needs to be added to the list, and then somebody goes and finds out those working group chairs.
Yeah. Somebody hasn't done that, have they?
Yeah, somebody. Somebody in the room do it.
Somebody, yeah.
So if you're a SEC area working group chair and you are not in the sector and you want to be, send an email. That will make it faster.
Yeah, I will do a better job.
If only we had some people from the IETF code sprint that could actually automate this in a data tracker. Okay, this is your last chance to walk up to the mic before I get my coffee. Okay, then, thank you for showing up, and hopefully we'll see you all in Bangkok. If we get applause. Wait, nobody gets applause normally. What's the difference here? Like, am I the junior pilot who just landed the plane?
I was just going to say, we landed the plane. Everybody's happy that we hit that bar.
Do this. Let me get this off.